Hello, this is Cookies56, and it's been quite a long time. I'm finally doing the containers tutorial, but before I start, there are some things we'll get to, but the reason I haven't been making tutorials in a long time is for various different reasons. I mean, I've been busy in real life with college, which are now finished, thank God. And just well, I'll be honest. One of the things I wanted to do with this tutorial was use the new way of doing containers with capabilities instead of using inventory, which for a long time I had not properly understood how the containers work with capabilities, but now I pretty much fully understand it. So there's actually a few ways we're going to be doing these. This video we're just going to do ones with tile entities, but I'm going to plan to do ones with an item, so you can have an item that has an inventory, and then also an inventory that is just stored within the player, so it's not attached to an item or a tile entity or anything. But this will be tile entities. Now, I'm not going to be doing 1.12 yet, because there isn't a recommended version, and there's been some pretty big changes, so we're going to stay at 1.11.2. I don't know when I'll move over, we'll see. Maybe when the recommended version comes out, maybe not, depends. But I'm on 1.11.2 latest. This is in my build.gradle, and I've set the mappings to stable_32. So I recommend setting them to stable 32, because otherwise things may be called different things for you. Unless you're on an older version, then obviously things are going to be different. But yeah, if you haven't run the setup decomp workspace and refresh Gradle here, and you'll be good to go. Now, there's a couple of things that are erroring. First of all, X position is now just X, and Y position is now Y. So that's easy enough to fix. Yeah. So that's fixed. And then here we've got, instead of get entity, there's now get immediate source and true source. We'll do true source. I'm guessing the difference between those is that when it says that, like, well, if you cause an entity, if you cause a death through another entity, I assume the immediate source is the thing that actually killed them. So that could be, I don't know, like an arrow that has been shot by a player, but then the true source is the player that shot that arrow. So we'll do true source. And then get entity item is now just get item. Well, we can just use get item. Yeah, I think, no, that is the same thing. It's an item stack, which is weird because then we're using get item from the item stack to get the item. A little bit of a weird choice of name there, because now it's get item. But that's it. That's all of the errors, I believe. I'll just see if this runs. I won't actually launch the game, like let it launch. But yeah, there's no errors. Okay. So that's good. So now we're actually ready to get going. Now, there are some terms that I want to just explain to make sure that everyone's kind of on the same page. So, first of all, a tile entity. Well, some people confuse tile entities with a block that has an inventory like a chest. That is not what a tile entity is. title entities can be used to do that, but that is not what they actually are. They are basically an entity that is attached to a block. So you can do things like writing and reading data to it using MBT tags, which I've not actually done a tutorial on. May do that after this. You don't really need to understand NBT to do this anyway, so it's fine. But yeah, so a title entity can also have can update, so you can have things based on ticks. So if you need something that is going to be constantly doing something, then that's how you do that. But of course, writing and reading MBT is what something like a container will use, because it needs to store the items in the tile entity. So they can be used for other things, and they are actually very simple. Now, a container is basically the thing that stores the information about the slots in an inventory, and it is open server side. So when you open like a chest on the server, it's opening the container, and well, it's making a new instance of the container, and then on the client it's opening the GUI. So the GUI is just what displays it. The container is actually what has the information about the positions of the slots and all of that, and managing the items moving between the slots and all of that. So those are pretty much the terms we need to know. I think that's everything. So first thing we're going to do is use a block. Now, we already have a block. Does all sorts of things though. So maybe we'll make a new block. I think that might be a good idea. So we'll make a new one. So in fact, don't need to type all that again. Let's just put a comma here. And we'll call it tutorial container block. It's a long name, but it will do. And then we'll make a class for this. What? Okay, is it gonna... There we go. Okay, that was very strange. Right. Block tutorial container. I could just call it that, actually. Let's call it that. We don't need block in the name. There we go. Now it's not so long. And we'll make it wood. Sure, why not? And then tutorial underscore container. There we go. And we want to register it. So this is, just simple stuff. We won't give it a texture just because it doesn't matter. It's not that important. We don't even have to register the render. Well, I'll do it anyway, since you probably want to if you're actually making a proper mod. It'll just have the missing model texture, which is fine. It'll work anyway, so it doesn't matter. So there's our block. We just want to add some things here, so let's insert our constructor, which... Is it using the right... Oh, the block tutorial container. It's because it doesn't extend block yet. Yeah. Where's the Minecraft block? There it is. Now let's actually put the right constructor in. There we go. Much better. And we will set the creative tab, so let's put this in our... In fact, we have our own, don't we? Where is it? It's in here, isn't it? Yep. And then unlocalized name, tutorial underscore container. Anything else we want in here? probably not. I don't think. Like, we don't need to set all this stuff at all. Can if you need to, but not for what we're doing. So, some other things we will need is, first of all, we need to implement tile entity provider. So this is basically what's gonna make it so when we place the block, it creates our tile entity in that block. So we need to implement or override create new tile entity. We don't have our tile entity yet, but we will make a new instance of it there. Some other things we will want is on block. Where is it? Activated. So we will make it so it opens the GUI when you right click it, and then well, just search break block to handle when we break the block. So if we want the items to drop out the inventory when we break the block, then we're going to be doing it in here. Otherwise, it doesn't matter. If you want the items to be lost, you don't need to handle this at all. So we'll leave that for now because we don't have any of our other stuff. I'm going to make a new class. Actually, no, wait, let's make a new package. And we'll put it in fact, wait, I already have a package here for tiles. So let's put it in there. Tile entity tutorial container. No, actually no, we'll just call it tutorial. Just don't need that many. And this just needs to be a tile entity. That's all it needs to do. So a tile entity on its own is really easy to use. If you just want a simple tile entity, it doesn't really do much. What? Oh right, I think we added in that one the name. Yeah, okay. Let's just add that. There we go, and then change that to name. There we go. So in our create new tile entity, we want new tile entity, and we don't want any of the existing ones. Tutorial. So now when we place a block in the game, it's going to use this tile entity, which does nothing right now. That's fine. Now we're gonna have we're gonna be using a built-in capability in Forge, which capabilities are a system that was added in Forge in 1.9, I believe, that are incredibly useful and provide much easier mod compatibility, especially with containers and having custom data in things. So capabilities can be attached to entities, item stacks, worlds as well, I believe. That was added later, but it's in now. And what else did I miss out? Tile entities, yeah. So this means that basically any of those things can store NBT data, first of all. So they have custom properties assigned to them. But it also means that, because the way that capabilities work is that there is a has capability and get capability methods, and you can use that to check basically if something has the capability, then you'll be able to use that capability. So the built-in capability, and I'm saying capability a lot, god damn it, is the item handler, which is basically the replacement for inventory that allows for a typical container in Minecraft, so something that just stores items and has slots. So this means that anything in any mod, if you check that the tile entity in question has the item handler capability, then they will be able to interface with that container. So when you're working with mod compatibility, you can easily manipulate mod containers and have that compatibility. So it's incredibly helpful, and also it's a lot simpler to implement than iInventory. Now, that explanation may have been a little bit confusing, but basically what we need to take away from it is that compatibility. It's good, and it's easy to implement as well. So from pretty much, if you're still using iInventory for a container, which most tutorials you'll see about containers will use because its own capabilities are kind of new, and also you can still use iInventory, still works. So that is why you still see it. But here I am doing a new way to do it that pretty much most mod authors are probably using. So that was a long explanation. Let's actually get to doing something in this. So we're going to be needing, first of all, we want an item stack handler. We'll just call this inventory equals new item stack handler, and this takes one parameter, which is the size. So we're going to have 9 slots. So we'll have 9 because I have got in here, I just took the dispenser. Let's open up this in here. I took the dispenser GUI and just copied it over, and I've called it container.png. So it's just got 9 slots, which is in a 3x3 grid rather than a row of 9. So pretty simple, but it's just going to act like a chest, but with 9 slots. So now we got this. That's pretty much all we need to do for the inventory. This is so simple. We're going to override some methods. So we're going to do read and write to NBT and has and get capability. And we don't need to do too much here. We just need to do compound dot, wait, no, inventory dot deserialize NBT, and then compound dot get compound tag inventory, and then in here we will be doing compound dot set tag inventory, and then inventory dot serialize NBT. So that may look confusing to anyone, to you that don't know what NBT is, but basically what we're doing here is deserializing NBT is making it so it's like usable, and then serializing it is making so it can actually be saved. So converting it into understandable data, and then the NBT tag compound is basically every single bit of data that's stored using NBT has a tag, which we set here as just inventory, and then you can get that data. So if we wanted to do like compound dot get, I don't know, let's say we got an integer and it's saved as like number or something, then we just have this key that identifies it to get the data, and then if we want to write data to it, we can do a similar thing where we do compound dot set integer, and then we give the key and then the actual integer. So we do like number. So I've now set number to 0. So now when we get integer that is number, that will be 0. So it's a way of reading and writing data. So when we quit the game, it will still be saved. And what we're doing here is just using the our item stack handler, which basically does everything for us, and saving all of the data as inventory. And that's it. So that is for reading and writing the data. That's all we have to do. That small little bit there. So we want capability equals capability item handler dot item handler capability. So that's the capability, the item handler one, just right there. And we're just gonna say return basically if capability equals the item handler capability, then it's gonna be true. Otherwise, we'll leave it up to the default has capability implementation that is in tile entity. So we could see that in here. I don't actually know if it has any. Let's just. Yeah, so look, it would basically, it's going to do that if it's false. Right, so then for get capability, similar thing here. We'll leave the super in because we need that. So we want the item handler capability again, and not an or. We're going to be using the inventory. So if it's the item handler, then we're returning the inventory. Otherwise, again, do the super method. And that is it. That is the whole tile entity done. That may seem kind of simple, and it is. If you've seen iInventory, you'll see how completely different iInventory is and how much more work it takes, because you have to implement a bunch of different methods that you don't really need to worry about with this. So, and in fact, I believe if you look in here, we have some basically all the things that we need. So set stack and slot to change a item in a slot. So we have the slot index and then the item that we're the item stack that we're setting. The get slots is the size of the inventory. So 9 in our case. But yeah, you can see that there's all this stuff implemented for us already. See, there's all this stuff for the MBT that we don't even need to implement, which is great, because everyone is like, if you're making a container, all that stuff you want, like there will be no case where you don't want the ability to get the item in a slot. So implementing that yourself is kind of silly. So yeah, makes it much nicer. And yeah, so now we got our tile entity. We also need our container and the GUI. So let's do the container first. We'll make a new package, and we will call it, let's just call it container, and then container tutorial extends container, and we want the net.minecraft.inventory one, not the java.awt or anything else. And we're going to need a couple of things in here. In fact, we need the constructor. So if we press Alt Insert Constructor, We could have just typed that, but whatever. Now we want can I interact with is required, and then we want transfer stack and slot. So first of all, can I interact with? True. We want them to be able to interact with the container. There is no reason not to. You can actually restrict that in other ways. But, I mean, you could do it in here. There's no reason not to, I suppose. But you don't exactly have much. You just have the player. I mean, if you want it to be so only a certain player can use it, then sure, okay. Check the player name or something. That's definitely a way you could do it. Anyway, so transfer stack and slot. Now, this method is going to have quite a lot of code in it, and the reason, well, what I'm going to be doing, because it is just, there's a lot of code, and it's not really, you're going to be using the same code in all of it. I'm not going to fully explain it. I'll explain it a little bit, but in the end, what transfer stack and slot is used for is to handle shift clicking, so you can transfer items from your inventory to the container or the other way around by shift clicking on an item. And you're gonna want that to work every time. Otherwise, if you don't want it to work, don't implement this method. Just don't bother. Now, in the constructor, we're going to be specifying the positions of all the slots. So we're going to need to look at our image here, which I'm going to open up in paint.net so we can get the coordinates of everything right. And then we're gonna need a little bit of simple math. Anyway, so what we're gonna need is a couple of things in the constructor here. We're gonna need the player inventory, and we're gonna need the tile entity. So the tile entity is our tile entity. And yeah, I'll just call it that. That's fine. And first thing I'm going to check is if the tile entity has the item handler capability. And it takes two arguments, the capability and then facing. Now, if you want to change, the reason you'd have facing is basically to change how it works depending on which side that you're using. In our case, it doesn't matter, so I'm just going to use north. You could also just do null. That would also work. But yeah, we're going to check if the tile entity has the capability. Otherwise, it's not going to work. And then we're going to get an instance of our inventory. So get capability now. Since we know that it has the capability, we can get the capability. So this is also going to be very useful for compatibility with other mods. For example, if you have your own capability, you can check that especially if you're attaching it to like every entity or whatever, like if you're attaching it to every player, or every tile entity, even tile entities from other mods, you want to make sure that they have the capability. Otherwise it won't work. So here's our inventory. Now we're going to add the slots for the player's inventory and then also our container, because those are the two things, you know, when you go in a chest, there's the slots for the chest and there's the slots for your main inventory and the hotbar, which is all one thing. So let's do the player inventory first, because that is the more complicated bit, I suppose. So we're going to do a hotbar first, and we're going to use... Well, okay, so before I go with this, what we're going to be using is add slot to container, which just takes a slot. So if we do new slot, and then it takes an inventory, so we're going to take the inventory player. Then we have to do the index. So let's say we just got the first slot, yeah, so it's 0. And then we have to do the position on the GUI. Now, if we did this for every slot, that's like 36 times for the player inventory, then another 9 times for our inventory. Now that's just stupid, because then we're going to have a lot of the same thing over and over again. So what I'm going to be doing is using for loops to simplify that. So let's just do, for the hotbar, it's super easy. We're just going to do for loop that starts at 0 and ends at 8. So we're using 9 to, so it goes to 0 to 8 because it stops before 9. And then we're going to do add slot to container, new slot, inventory player, and then we can just use I as the index. And then the position is pretty easy to do. So first of all, we're going to have the starting position, which will be the... So we're at the hotbar down here. And basically we want it to start at this corner and then go across all these slots. So let's move that out of the way. So from the very edge, we can see that we have 8 pixels to there. So 8 plus, and then we're going to be doing I times, and then I believe it is, yeah, so this is 18 pixels wide. So times 18. So that's for the X position. So we're going to start at 8, then I times 18. So when it's 0, it's just going to be 18. So we're going to have, well, no, it's going to be 0 because 0. So it's going to start at this first slot. Then when it's 1, it will be doing this slot. Then the next slot until it gets to 8, which will be this slot. So that's all of them. Then the Y position, we don't have to do much. We just need to figure out the coordinate of this, which let's just go from the top. And we can see that's 142. So 142. And that is the hotbar. Those are the hotbar slots. Then this is the more complicated bit, because we are going to be doing these 3 rows here. So we can't just do, I mean, we could, I suppose, just do a row like that for each one. But that's just, you know, more effort. So we're going to need 2 for loops here. So first of all, we're going to do our rows. So we've got 3 rows. And then we want our columns. So we've got 9. And I've done I because I'm silly. There we go. So we got I and J. If you make that more, I mean, to make it maybe more understandable, you could use Y and X. In fact, I'll do that just to make it nicer. So X, there we go. Right. So again, we're going to be doing add slots container, new slot, and inventory player again. But this time we've got a bit of, well, we've got more of a complicated thing, because with I, we're just going from, so this is slot 0, and then that's slot 8, but then this is slot 9, and then it goes all the way to 35 here. So we can't just use Y or X, because it will get to 8, and then it will go back to 0 here, because these are all 0, and these are all 8. So what we're going to be doing here is using, so we've got x plus y times 9 plus 9. So the way that works is that we got plus 9, which is our starting point, because we end at 8 here, so we start off at slot 9 here, yeah? So if both x and y, which is the first thing, are 0, then 0 times 9 is 0. 0 plus 0 is 0 plus 9, so then we get slot 9. Then this for loop goes again, and the x is now 1. Now we've got 1 plus, again, 0 plus 9. Now we've got slot 10. Then that goes all the way through, and now y is 1. Now 1 times 9 is 9, plus, well, this is now 0, so we'll say 9, plus 9, 18, which is this slot. So we get all of these rows accounted for, just like that. Maybe a little bit complicated, but if you just follow the values of these, you can see how it's going to work. Now, we have... wait, let me get this right, because we're inside... There we go. Then we got the x and y position again on a GUI. So this is going to be pretty similar to the last one. In fact, pretty much identical. We're going to have 8 plus... Then we got x... Yeah. And then times 18. So same thing with the x positions. And then y position. Now we've got multiple rows, so we can't just use one. But what we're going to find is the starting position. So this top bit here is 84. So 84 plus y, whoops, times 18, because it's the same. These are 18 because they're squares, so 18 by 18. And there we go. So that is the player's inventory. That was kind of long, but there we go. And now we need to do our actual container. So this is basically going to be identical to this, just with less slots. So again, oh yeah, one thing I didn't explain. Why is it times 9? Well, because it's 9 across. There's 9 slots here. So in this case, we're doing 3. So we'll call it y again. And this is also going to be 3. But then this one is going to be 3 as well. So 3 by 3. And then add slot to container, new. Now this time we're going to do slot item handler. In a bit I'll go over doing a custom slot class so we can restrict what items go in there. But for now we'll just do slot item handler, because in the slot normally it uses an I inventory, because that's what vanilla Minecraft containers use. But we're using I item handler, so we want a slot item handler. But it takes the same arguments, just instead of you can see in the here takes an I inventory, here takes an item handler, or I item handler. So this is going to be pretty much the same as what we have down here, but we don't need the starting point of 9. We're starting at 0 because we have 9 slots, so we're going from 0 to 8. So if you did have a row of 9 slots, just like the hotbar, you could just have one for loop and have it like this. But I decided to use the dispenser GUI because it has multiple rows, so it's slightly more complicated. If we just had one slot, then you wouldn't even need a for loop. Oh god. But in this case, we do have we have rows. So x plus, and then in brackets, y times 3, and then that's it. So now we're just doing times 3 because it's only 3 in a row. And we're starting at 0, so there's no point in putting plus 9. Then, our starting position on the x is different from 8 because it's not at the edge. So, let's just figure out what that is. 62. 62 plus, and then we've got x times 18. And then, similarly, we are going to do this, which is 17 plus y times 18. And that will get us the position of our containers slots. So you could actually label these with comments, player, inventory. In fact, let's call it main, and then whoops, player hotbar inventory. Space that out a bit, and then container inventory. There we go. So, just to make that clear, of course you don't need to put comments. That's never required, but you know, it might make it more clear. If you need to change your slots, for example, if your container is not this, then obviously you're going to be making something different. If you've just got the same sort of thing, but instead of 3x3, it's, I don't know, 3x5, pretty much the same thing. You just need to change these values. And in fact, we could set up some variables to make it easier. Like we could have a rows and columns variable. So then you could just change that and it would change this at the same time as this, because these are going to be the same value every time. But we're not going to be doing that because we don't need to. Another thing is that you don't have, if you wanted your container to work, let's say you've got one that if you have like a chest next to it, then you can see the inventory of the chest. You could do that. You could put, instead, if you don't need the player's inventory for some reason, you don't even have to use that. You could use an inventory from something else. So if there's an adjacent chest next to it, then you get the chest inventory and display that. It really, you can do whatever you want with it. We're just doing player because in most cases you're going to need the player's inventory because you're moving your stuff into another inventory or the other way around. Now, one thing we're missing from here is the transfer stack and slot. Now this is quite complicated, and you don't need to change this because you're going to need this in pretty much every container that you do, unless you don't want shift clicking, which I can't see why you wouldn't, but sure. So we need quite a bit of stuff. In fact, I would just recommend just copying this, to be honest. There's no reason not to. So we're getting a stack that's just empty because we're in 1.11. We have to do item stack.empty and not null. Unfortunately, we can't do that anymore. So if you are in 1.10 or below for some reason, you might have some trouble following this if you're in a lower version, but you want to use null instead of item stack.empty. Anyway, so let's get a instance of our slot in index, and then check if I missed out the equals there. Slot is not null, and it has a stack. Then we're gonna call this, we need another item stack, and this is the stack that's in the slot, so I'm gonna call it stack in slot. I've seen other people just call it like stack 1 or something. That's just confusing, you know, just, you don't want two things called the same thing, but with a number, that's kind of confusing to me. So, so we're just getting the item stack from the slot. Then stack equals copy of stack and slot. Then we're going to get the number of slots inside the container. So inventory slots is the all of the slots in the container. So all of these basically added together. Then we're going to minus that from, you know, I don't like how they put player in, so I'm just gonna put player. Player, and we don't even need the super, but I'll leave it there for now. And then the inventory size, there we go. So we get the number of slots because we're taking away the number of player slots. Then we got index. If index is less than container slots, then it's part of the container. And then we're gonna do merging the stack and slot. And this is gonna take container slots. As I said, you don't really need to follow this. You could always just copy it from the source, as this will be on GitHub. This is like really one of the few cases where I'm going to say that you might as well just copy it. We got an else if. So if it's not part of the container. So this is for moving to the inventory. From the container. And we're returning item stack.empty because we need to make that an empty item stack because we're transferring it, so it's going to leave an empty item stack. Then we need to get the stack size, so get count is the new stack size variable in 1.11. So if it's 0, so if it's, you know, if there is no stack, basically, then we need to put an empty item stack. Then we do on slot change, and then there we go, and we're going to return the stack. So if the slot is null or there is no stack in it, then it's just going to return an empty item stack. Otherwise, it possibly will, if it doesn't return an empty item stack anywhere in here, then it will be the copy of the stack that's already in the slot. So, I mean, you can read through this. If you can understand it, that's great. You don't need to at all. There's no real reason to, because the behavior of this doesn't need to change. I cannot think of a reason why you'd need to change it. Like, even with weirdly complicated containers, you're going to want this. I mean, I suppose if you've got multiple inventories other than the players, maybe you'd want to change this. So, yeah, but otherwise, this is going to stay like this. So that's the container. So the container is done completely. That we don't need to change anything, I don't think so. We just need the GUI, and then we also have not done where is it? Let's close that. We haven't made it open the GUI yet, because we don't have it yet. Which we're going to need a GUI handler, which I'll do after the GUI is made. And then we also need to make it drop the blocks when it's, well, the items in the inventory when it's broken. So the GUI we will put in here, of course, and we'll call it GUI tutorial container, because we've already got tutorial. And then this is going to extend GUI container, which again is going to do a lot of things for us. First of all, actually we're going to change the constructor. It's going to take the inventory player, and it's going to take the tile entity tutorial, and then we're going to do new container tutorial, and then we just give it our constructors stuff. And then we need the foreground and background layer methods. Well, we don't actually need the foreground one. I think it's the background one that's required. And then, oh yeah, let's get our texture. So just make this private, static, resource, well, let's make it final. Resource location, texture equals new resource location. And then we have our mod ID, and then textures / GUI / container.png. So there's, I mean, if you've seen my GUI tutorial, this will mostly be familiar. We're just getting our texture to then bind so we can draw it. So, oh yeah, that's the other thing we're going to set here actually, is the X size, because there's some built-in variables into GUI container. We're going to set the Y and X size, so I believe the X size is 176, yeah, and then the Y is 166, okay. So, 176, 166, so if you're, you know, just get the dimensions of this, not of the actual file, since it needs to be 256 by 256, you just want the size of your actual, the thing that's actually going to be displaying. So you could have, if you want to draw other icons onto your GUI, you can have them outside of here, but still only draw this. And then let's actually draw it. So we need to bind that. So I believe we can do this. There we go. Bind that, and then draw it. So we want the, I believe we can use, no, we want GUI left, GUI top, 0, 0. Wait, what? Why is it only telling me about that? Okay, that's weird. Then we want the X size and Y size. Oh, okay, that's fine. And then that will draw this whole thing onto the screen in the center. It's already done that with GUI left and GUI top. It's pretty nice that we have that built in with this, with GUI container, so we don't have to do too much. Then we can also, if we want to, draw the title, like the name of the container. You know how, like, when you look in the chest, it says chest. We can do that if we want. So let's just, we don't need this super at all. Well, I suppose you could leave it there, but it doesn't matter. Font renderer, again, if you're not on stable 32, it might be like OBJ, because that's what it used to be. If it is, I recommend changing those mappings in the build.gradle to stable 32. If you've done that and it's not there, make sure you refresh, click the refresh in the Gradle window after running setup decomp workspace again, and it should change. Then we just want to draw a string. So let's draw a string. Now we want to make it localized, so let's just do some... well, first of all we want to do new text. It's text, isn't it? It's probably because it... Okay. Yeah. Translation. We want to do a new one. And then we're going to have, I don't know, tile dot... Well, yeah, tile dot container dot name. There we go. In fact, if we just use the name of our block, let's do that. Dot get formatted text. I think that's what... Wait, do we want unformatted or formatted? I think we want formatted. We'll see. That's what we want in there, and then that'll be translatable. And then we'll just put it at 5. That'll do. You can get that. So then we want a color from Java, the java.awt, and we'll do dark gray, and then get our RGB. So we got the right color code there, and that should be the GUI done. Again, super simple. This is the nice thing about this, is that it's, for the most part, pretty simple. The container is probably the most complicated part of this entire thing. So now that we've got our GUI, we need to actually make it open. So we need a GUI handler. Where should I put this though? Because I could put it in, I guess I could put it in here. Sure. And this is going to implement a GUI handler. The only reason I was like kind of hesitant to put it in here is because it is also server side. But it doesn't matter. It's just a name. Client doesn't necessarily mean it can't be in, can't run on a server. So we have get server GUI element and get client GUI element, which is basically going to be these methods will handle when we do. So I'll go into here when we do this. If we do player. And in fact, I'll change this now. Player in and world in. We're just going to make world and player. Player.openGUI, and it takes an instance of our mod, which I don't think we set up yet, but we'll just leave that. Then it takes the GUI ID. Now we don't have a GUI ID set up, but what it's going to do is basically when we give it an ID. So let's say we gave it 0. It's gonna. The GUI handler is going to handle what GUI that opens on both the server and the client with that ID. So, first of all, we're gonna make some IDs here. So, well, let's say GUI tutorial container ID. That's kind of long, and then that's just going to be 0. If you have any more, you can just call it. You can just make it 1. The ID is not going to conflict with anything as long as you just have all the IDs that you're using not be identical. It's all good. So we're then gonna we'll leave. Actually, we don't need to return null. Well, we're going to need to return something, but we're going to do a switch statement. And we're going to switch the ID, and then case, and then our ID. So if it is our tutorial container ID, then we're going to return a new container, because we're on server, so container, if I can spell it right, no, container tutorial, and it's going to take the player's inventory, so player.inventory. And then we're going to need, well, no, we don't want that actually. We want world. No. What we're going to do, this is going to make it easier. Right, let's make a block pos, first of all. Which say pos equals new... okay, yeah, import that. Block pos, and then it's going to take X, Y, and Z. There we go. Or Z for Americans, but Z for me. And then we're going to say, well, we're going to make a tile entity instance as well, so world.getTileEntity pos. So we don't have to make it there. I suppose we could just put this in here, and then we don't need that. Sure, why not? We need the tile entity, so we're going to say TE. I think that's... wait, that's all... oh no, we need to cast it. There we go. As this is just a generic tile entity, but we need tile entity tutorial specifically. And then what I'm going to do, because we're returning, we don't need to break. I'm going to add a default case, which is going to return null. Because if none of the IDs, if the ID that you put in doesn't match, then it's not going to open anything. And it does need to return something, of course. And then we're going to do exactly the same thing for the client one, but instead of container, we're doing GUI, what is it? Is it tutorial container? Yeah. And it takes the same arguments. We've made it so it has the same constructor. So there we go. So we're opening the GUI in the client, the container on the server. We've got the same ID checking. If those were different, you'd probably have very strange results. So probably don't want to do that. Now, our GUI handler is done, however, it's not going to be used. So we need to actually register that. And that will be done in the init, which we would do here. So we're going to do network registry dot... no. Oh, I need the instance, right, okay. Dot register GUI handler. And then it's going to take an instance of the mod, which we don't have. Oh no, we do. When did we do that? Okay. Well, there you go. There's our mod instance right there. Which we're not even using. It's weird that I added that. Okay. So our instance. And then... if I didn't mention that in the tutorial, here it is. We just need to... it's just public static tutorial mod, or the name of your main class. See, I'm in tutorial mod, and then have the add at mod.instance. And it can be called whatever you want. I just call it instance because that makes sense. You could call it mod instance. Doesn't matter. The name is not important. So then we just got an instance of our GUI handler, which is just GUI handler. And that's registered the GUI handler. And then, to make it open the GUI in our block, where is our block? There it is. We just need to, well, it's going to be a little bit more complicated just to make sure it doesn't crash. So, first of all, we're going to get a instance of our tile entity, which is going to be world.getTileEntity at pos. Now, this should be true in pretty much all cases. We need to cast it. But in case it isn't, we'll check if it's not null. Now this could happen if you're making a block that you already have in your mod, that you're now making a tile entity. The ones that are already placed in your world that you've made won't have the tile entity because they are added when you place them. So if you tried right-clicking it and it didn't have the tile entity, because these are old blocks, it would crash. Otherwise, it probably will never happen. But it's nice to have those safety checks so you don't get crashes. Then we're going to check as well. So if it's not null and it has the capability, because that's another reason why it could crash. If it both has the capability and is not null, so if it's not null, if it is null, then this won't even be checked, so it won't crash because of that. Then we're going to get the instance of our inventory. So get the capability. There we go. So we have our inventory now. another thing there. Then we're gonna, well, actually we don't even need to do that, I don't think. Well, we could do. I mean, it depends if, well, do I want to check that? No, we don't. No, we don't need it. Let's open the GUI. And then it takes the instance. It takes the GUI ID, which is, I know, of course we could put just 0, because we know it's 0, but let's just use that in case the ID changes. Then we take the world, X, Y. Oh, okay, it's not. Right, okay. No, we want pos.getX, pos.getY, and pos.getZ. And that will open the GUI. The only thing we haven't got here now is breaking the block. I'll do that in a bit. Let's run the game, because I believe everything is done. Now that was bloody long. I actually am not sure how long this tutorial is, because I do need to edit some things out of it, which will make it a bit shorter, but it's been a long time. So let's run up the game. I'm in the game, and I have our block here. Oh look, it works. Doesn't have the name because we haven't actually added it to the language file or anything, but here it is. So you can see the slots are working. We can see our inventory like we should be able to, and all the slots are aligned properly. If you got the positions wrong, then the slots will still appear. They just might be in the wrong place, because again, this texture does not influence the slots at all, like the position of the slots. Like, the game does not check if this exact color and shape exists. Obviously, that would be stupid. So it's just a visual thing. So you can see that we, like, when you hover over it, that it has that white. If you had no texture, these things would still appear. So our container is working. As you can see, that it's got that shovel in there, and you know that it's working properly. We can shift click, as we should be able to. Now, two things that I'm going to be doing after this is, first of all, we're going to make it so when we break what just happened? Oh, you know, it doesn't matter. So, yeah, we got something printing. I can't remember what is printing that too, but I should really get rid of it. It's probably the health bar or something. Right, so the things that we need to do is make it so when I break it, the items drop, because right now nothing drops. You can also see that the missing texture thing now is now different in 1.11.2. I don't know when it was added. It's been a long time for me, so got auto jump on. That's annoying. Not me. What am I? No. And then the other thing we need to do, well, what I'll show is making the slots take specific items. So, for example, let's say you only want shovels in here, iron shovels. You could do that, so nothing, like if I tried to put this in here, it wouldn't work. But right now it does, because it's just a slot that is a slot for anything. If you're just making like a normal chest item, then this is perfect, pretty much, other than the breaking part. So, let's do that. Now, let's make it... Well, let's do the breaking block first, since we are here. We're going to leave that super. Might as well. Just to make sure it drops the block itself when you break it. So we're going to get an instance of our tile entity, just like the other... Oh, and again, I need to change this. I do not like using world in, it's just silly. It looks bad, you know? Right. Oh, and I missed out the equals, of course. Don't know why I do that so much. And again, if the T is not null, and it has the capability, just like before. What is that? So, same check as before, but this time we're going to get the inventory instance, because we actually need it this time. So at any point, if you have an instance of the tile, so you can get the inventory of it, which is pretty nice. When I do a tutorial on just having it in the player, then you'll be able to access that. It's the same sort of thing where you can get the capability from the player at any point, which is definitely a good way of accessing the data. So if the inventory isn't null, because that's something we need to check for just in case. You know, like, you always want to be safe with this. You don't want crashes. You'd rather something not work than crash. Especially if you're releasing this to the public, because while it's annoying that it doesn't work, it's more annoying to the user if the game just turns off, you know? Right, so we're gonna... should I actually explain this? We got a for loop here, and we're gonna loop through the inventory slots. So inventory.getSlots is the size of the inventory, so that's gonna be the same as doing 9, like that. So for every slot in the inventory, we're gonna check if there's the stack in slot I is not empty. Because if it is empty, we don't care. We're not going to drop an empty item, you know? We're only dropping the items that are actually items, and not just a blank slot. So we're going to make a instance of an entity item of the item we're going to drop. So we're just going to put this in like the center of the block. It's going to spawn in the middle. So we're going to plus 0.5 to do that. So we're getting the coordinates, and of course the coordinates are in a corner. We plus 0.5 to get it in the center of the block. Then we're going to do inventory.get stack in slot I, and that'll set it to our item in the inventory. And then we're just going to do something to make the items, like, kind of, you know how when you break the chests in Minecraft, the items kind of explode. We're going to make that same effect. So we've got a multiplier here, basically to affect how much the items actually spread out, which is only at 0.1, because we don't want them to go, you know, everywhere. Then we're going to get our motion, which is going to have a little bit of randomness to it, for each direction. It's a float, so we've got 0.5 f rather than 0.5 because those are doubles, just to make sure all that is clear. So it's all the same for every direction here. And then we're actually going to change the motion, set the motion. So motion x equals motion x times multiplier. And then the same for every other one. So that's settled the motion. Then we just need to actually spawn the entity item. So spawn. There we go. So that will spawn the items when we break them, and that's it. That's gonna make them explode out like a chest would. So you don't lose the items when the block has block has been broken. Now, let's make a custom slot. So, I'll put this in the container package, because, you know, it's related to it. And I'll call it, let's just call it slot tutorial. And it's going to extend slot item handler, since that's what we're using. And then we just need the constructor, which we don't need to change. I don't think we do. And we want is item valid. This is the only thing we need. There are other things here, but we're going to be using this because this is the method that is basically we're gonna use as the place to check whether you can put the item in that slot or not. So if we do false, then nothing can go in the slot at all. If we just return false and do nothing else. But of course, we're gonna do a check. So if stack dot get item equals items dot, and I was saying about the iron shovel. Well, if that's true, if it is an iron shovel, it can go in there. Otherwise, turn false. And put brackets because we've just got one line. You know, actually, I'll just put them there just to make sure we're all clear. Sometimes can make it a bit confusing if you don't have the brackets there. So I'll put them there. And there we go. So, of course, you can do more complicated checks here to make sure you're getting the right items in. You know, if you've got NBT or metadata checks and all that, do all that in there. And this is all you need to restrict the items that go in the slot. Of course, we're not actually using this slot, so let's actually change that. All you need to do is, instead of using slot item handler, we just use our slot that we just made. So, slot tutorial, done. That's it. And now we can only put iron shovels in there. So, I'll launch the game and we'll see that working. Okay, so we're in the game and let's place our thing. So we can put a shovel in there, but we cannot put this in here. As much as I want to try, I can shift click and it will not work. But if I shift click an iron shovel, it will go in there just fine. And now, let's break it. Oh look, there we go. So, that is everything for this tutorial, I believe. Now, there are other types of containers that people may want to see, like the kind of thing you do with like a crafting table or a furnace or something. I'm going to get to that. I'll be honest, I have never actually made one of those, but once I figure it out, we'll get a tutorial. I mean, there are some other tutorials I want to do before that anyway, so... and I know I'm really bad at getting these tutorials out, but I do have a bunch of free time right now, so maybe we'll get some more done in a timely fashion. This has been incredibly long. I think it's been... it feels like hours. So, I mean, thank you for watching. If, of course, questions in the comments, and source is always available on GitHub, so I'll push it to the repository once this is done. So before this video is uploaded, it will be there. The one last thing I'm going to say is that this MBT is something that I was going to do a tutorial before this, but as people like really seemed to want this tutorial, and like I kind of said that it was going to be the next one, I've done this first. I'm also going to be doing a tutorial on making like blocks that rotate, you know, like how when you place down a chest, let's find a chest, it rotates, so you know the facing directions, so you know these are facing different ways, and also metadata. So metadata kind of links with that, but then items can have it as well, so and this also uses block states now instead of metadata, but the metadata and block states are linked together until I think 1.13 they're planning to remove that, so I mean remove metadata, that is. So yeah, I've got some things planned. I hope I will be able to get them done soon. Otherwise, see you in months, I suppose. Oh, no. I will say, I was thinking of ending the series, but I suddenly had the motivation to make more, so, yeah, expect more. Goodbye.